Hi there, Mrs. B. Gonzalez here, and this is our first official Teach Smart newsletter for the 2026 academic school year. I want to start off by thanking you all for joining this partnership and letting you know that every time you enter a new era, we will have a newsletter ready for you. This newsletter is going to consist of four main things. The first one is going to be insights into the 2026 STAAR release test. So what questions were asked and what implications are we gathering from these questions that will inform our instruction? The second thing is going to be a quick overview of how that era is structured. What lessons are there and how are they organized to meet those implications? And we're also going to touch base on some instructional strategies that really support the delivering of our Teach Smart curriculum. And lastly, specific to the newsletter, you're always going to have some additional enrichment activities or support activities for your Tier 2, Tier 3 instruction. These are basically, instead of having to dig into the drive, you have them all combined comprehensively here in this one newsletter. I hope you guys find this useful. Let's dig in and let's start with our first one, which is exploration and colonization. I do want to say that this is going to be a very quick overview on each question. I do not want to make this a very lengthy video. The goal is for you to sit down with your colleagues and really dive deep into each and every question, identifying implications, misconceptions, and having that inform your instruction or make any adjustments to your instruction when you're delivering it. So with that said, there were 4 questions that came out in the 2026 STAAR release. You'll notice that the frequency is different than what we're used to. But again, we're not trying to figure out the test because we cannot figure it out. It's about gaining awareness as to what language am I supposed to be using? What are these big ideas that kids need to be walking out of class knowing? So first question that came out is question number 2, which it is the highest performing question in the entire state of Texas. So the mastery wise, it was the highest performing with a 75%. Take a look and drill down and look at how did your district do, your campus, and then yourself personally on this question. As we look at this question, I like to think of using the strategy of bucketing. So if we look at these items, we put a bucket and we put in this bucket Puritans, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Quakers, and Pennsylvania. And you ask your kids, what do all these things have in common? If we had to label this bucket based on the answer choices, which would be the best title for this bucket based on what you see in the bucket? So they start to really think critically and comprehensively and say, okay, well, this bucket has Puritans, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Quakers, and Pennsylvania, and all of those have to do with religion. And I know that these individuals were escaping religious persecution. So the best title for this bucket would be B, to escape religious persecution. So think about that strategy and using it in the classroom as you answer these questions. Let's move on to the next question. Question 16 is quite the opposite of the first question we just went over. If you look at the results, the data, this was one of the lowest performing in the state of Texas with an 11% mastery. And so as we look at this question, it's actually quite straightforward. There's no stimuli. So because of that, there's nothing for the kids to be able to like springboard off of, to use, to help them kind of dig into their brain and find that pathway to that answer. So they have to know, when I think of representative government and why it grew, what are the causes for that? The problem with this question is it's a new item type and kids struggle with multi-select questions. And so in this question, the answer was the distance that separated the colonies and The other one was colonists maintained English political traditions. So kids need to understand that when they came over from Britain, they brought over some of these political traditions, such as the idea that parliament is a type of representative government. And so they wanted to create their own and have these rights as well. So you'll notice that in the curriculum, this is specifically stated as the roots. There's going to be a tree, the roots of the growth of representative government. So those roots are that they brought over these traditions. They brought over the ideas of like the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, Parliament. And then all of these additional causes led to the growth of this representative government. As we continue, question 25 is again a straightforward multiple choice question. So if we think about these type of questions, it's really either the kids grasp the knowledge, they have that knowledge, or they don't have it, and it's going to be very difficult for them to answer, right? So in this case, the question has to do with the transatlantic slave trade. And if we look at it, question 25, the state was at a 58%. So look at your data, compare your data to the state data, and then identify some misconceptions, some implications from that. Students need to understand and associate the fact that the transatlantic slave trade developed because there was a demand for slave labor. There was a demand from the plantation system. So if you look at all the previous STAAR release questions on the transatlantic slave trade, the information or what the kids are expected to know is pretty much the same. Let me read those to you. The profitability of cash crop agriculture, the economic demands of the plantation system, the demand for slaves in the American colonies, increased profits from plantation owners, labor demands of the plantation system, the growth of cash crops, increased demand for cash crops. So kids need to understand that there was a demand for slave labor. The plantation system demanded this. The idea of, we're going to level this up. Mercantilism demanded this. So they need to associate demand of with the transatlantic slave trade. And the final question, question 26, what we see here is that they did a bucketing question. They gave you all the information that goes in this bucket, and then they're asking the kids to label the bucket. And this question, the percentage from the state of Texas, question 26, was at a 63%. So fairly well in comparison to other questions. However, this bucketing strategy works perfectly with this question. And also looking into our curriculum, you're going to notice that we teach things in semi-isolation. First, we start with Spanish exploration, then French, and then British. But we have a specific day in our lesson, in our curriculum, I believe it's EC6, that really puts all of these European colonization into one lesson, into one day of review, where kids have to differentiate between them, but also understand that they all are European land claims and colonization, right? Reasons for colonization. So that lesson really allows for kids to understand how all of these go together. So that wraps up the four main questions that were asked under European exploration and colonization. We'll see you on the next one for American Revolution.